The look on my daughter Chloe's face when the general manager of the Grand Oaks estate walked into the tasting room to tell her the final deposit had failed and that her reservation for the wedding of the century was being released to the waiting list is something I will take to my grave with a smile. For 28 years, I was the man who made every one of her problems disappear with a stroke of a pen. I was the safety net, the provider, the silent partner in her life of luxury. She never once considered that the man who built the foundation could also be the one to pull it out from under her. But to understand why I left her standing in a $15,000 designer gown with no venue and a dead credit card, I need to take you back to the beginning. I spent 35 years in residential construction. I started as a frame layer in the heat of the Georgia summers and ended as the owner of a firm that built the very suburbs Chloe grew up in. I've got the calluses and the bad lower back to prove it. Everything I did, every 60-hour work week and every missed Saturday, was for my family. When my first wife, Diane, decided she'd had enough of a husband who smelled like sawdust and sweat, I didn't fight her on the house or the alimony. I wanted Chloe to have stability. I paid for the private schools, the equestrian lessons, and the 4-year degree in communications that she still never used. I've always been a patient man. You have to be in my line of work. You wait for the permits, you wait for the weather, you wait for the foundation to cure. I thought that patience would eventually pay off with my daughter. I thought that once she hit her mid-20s, she'd see the man behind the bank account. But that should have been my wake-up call. I kept telling myself her entitlement was just a phase, a side effect of the lifestyle I'd worked so hard to give her. The first real crack appeared about 3 years ago when I met Elena. I'd been a widower in spirit for a long time, and Elena was a breath of fresh air, a high school history teacher who liked fly fishing and didn't care about the brand of my truck. When we got married, Chloe didn't even come to the ceremony. She sent a text saying she was busy, then had the audacity to ask for her quarterly allowance increase 2 days later. I let it slide. I thought she just needed time to adjust. But if that was all, I probably would have let it go. I'm a big believer in second chances. But then came the engagement. Chloe started dating Tyler about 18 months ago. Tyler is what I call a paper tiger. He works in private equity, which as far as I can tell means he wears $3,000 suits and talks down to waiters while living in a condo his parents pay for. From the moment we were introduced, he treated me like I was the help. At our first dinner, he actually explained to me how real estate worked, oblivious to the fact that I'd developed half the zip code we were sitting in. I watched Chloe change when she was around him. She became sharper, colder, and that's when the demands started. Last August, they called me to a dinner at Vittorio's, the kind of place where the wine list is longer than the menu. Chloe didn't even ask how I was or how Elena's mother was doing after her surgery. She just slid a leather binder across the table. "That's the vision board, Dad," she said, her eyes gleaming with a kind of greed I hadn't seen before. "The Grand Oaks Estate, June 14th. We're doing the platinum package. It's $100,000 for the venue, the catering, and the open bar." I looked at the binder. $100,000. That wasn't just a wedding. That was a down payment on a house. That was a year of my life when I was starting out. I looked her in the eye and said, "Chloe, that's a lot of money. I'm happy for you, truly, but we should talk about a budget that makes sense for everyone."
Tyler chuckled, a condescending, thin sound. "Robert, let's be real. You've got the liquidity. This is Chloe's dream. You wouldn't want her to have a budget wedding, would you? It's about the branding of the family." "The branding?" I asked. I felt a slow heat rising in my neck, but I kept my voice level. "I'm a builder, Tyler, not a brand." Chloe reached across and patted my hand, but there was no affection in it. "Dad, don't be difficult. I've already told the coordinator you're handling the deposits. Oh, and there's one more thing. About the guest list." She hesitated, and for a second I thought she was going to show a shred of humanity. Instead, she twisted the knife. "We want the wedding to be traditional," she said. "For the sake of the photos and the family dynamic, we think it's best if Alina doesn't attend. It would be awkward for Mom, and honestly, Tyler's family is very high society. We want to keep the inner circle to real family only. You understand, right?" The room went quiet. I could hear the clink of silverware from the next table.
My wife, the woman who had spent the last 3 years listening to me complain about my joints, the woman who had helped me navigate my retirement, the woman who was currently making me the happiest I'd been in decades, was being banned from my own daughter's wedding because she didn't fit the brand. And I was just the guy expected to pay for the privilege of being insulted. Something in me shifted that day. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the binder. I didn't even tell her no. I realized in that moment that they didn't see me as a father. They saw me as a bank account with a heartbeat. I see, I said. I took a slow sip of my water. Real family only. Exactly, Chloe said, looking relieved. I knew you'd understand. You've always been so reliable, Dodd. I spent the next 2 months getting everything in order. They had no idea what was coming. None of them did. I played the part of the doting, reliable father to perfection. I told Chloe to go ahead and book everything. I told her the Grand Oaks was a fine choice. I even told her to get the premium floral arrangements and the 7-tier cake. Every time she called me with a new expense, I just said, "Send the invoice to my office, honey. I'll make sure the deposits are set up." What she didn't know was that I had already sat down with my lawyer and my accountant. I'd also had a very long, very private conversation with the general manager at the Grand Oaks, a man named Marcus who had worked with years ago on a country club project. I told Chloe I would set up a payment schedule through my business account. I gave the venue a credit card for the initial small holding fees, just enough to keep the dates locked in and the planning moving forward. But I made it very clear to Marcus that the final, massive deposit, the $80,000 balance that was due exactly 60 days before the event, would require a specific manual authorization from me. As the months went by, the disrespect escalated. Chloe sent out the save the dates. My name wasn't even on them. It was The Marriage of Chloe Margaret and Tyler Jameson, hosted by her mother, Diane. I was paying for the party, but I wasn't even mentioned. Then came the bridal shower. Elena wasn't invited, of course, but Chloe had the nerve to call me the next day to complain that the gift Elena and I had sent, a high-end stand mixer and a set of professional cookware, was too domestic and didn't fit her registry. She wanted me to return it and just send the cash. If that was all, I probably would have just stopped the check right then, I told Elena one night as we sat on our porch. But they need to learn how a foundation actually works. You can't build something on top of nothing and expect it to stand.
The final tasting was scheduled for the day the big deposit was due. It was the big event where the real family would gather to sample the $200 a plate menu. Chloe, Tyler, Diane, and Tyler's parents were all there. I arrived alone, wearing my best suit, looking every bit the proud father. The atmosphere was thick with pretension. Tyler's father was talking about his yacht in the Caymans. Diane was acting like she was the Queen of England, talking about how we had curated such a beautiful event. Chloe was at the head of the table, barking orders at the waitstaff like they were subhuman. Midway through the main course, a Wagyu beef fillet, Marcus, the manager, stepped into the room. He looked professional, but he caught my eye and gave the slightest nod. "Excuse me, Miss Margaret," Marcus said, stepping toward Chloe. "I'm terribly sorry to interrupt such a lovely lunch, but we've run into a bit of a snag. The final deposit for the venue and catering was due at noon today. We attempted to process the payment on the corporate card on file, and it was declined." The table went silent. Chloe's fork hit her plate with a clatter. "What? That's impossible," she snapped, turning to me. "Dad, did you forget to move the money? This is embarrassing." I took a slow, deliberate bite of my steak. I chewed it thoroughly, wiped my mouth with the linen napkin, and set it down. "I didn't forget, Chloe," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I just decided not to authorize it." Tyler let out a forced laugh. "Robert, come on, stop joking around. My parents are here. This isn't the time for your working man humor." "I'm not joking, Tyler," I said. I looked around the table, taking in their faces. Diane's mouth was hanging open. Tyler's parents looked like they just smelled something foul. "Dad, what are you doing?" Chloe hissed, her face turning a blotchy red. "You promised. The invitations are out. The dress is bought. You can't do this." "Actually, I can," I said. "You see, I did some thinking about that conversation we had at Vittorio's, the one where you told me Elena wasn't real family. The one where you decided that the woman who supports me, loves me, and makes my life worth living wasn't good enough to sit at your table." "That's different," Chloe cried. "This is my day. It's about my vision." "Your vision was built on my hard work," I said, leaning forward. "The older man they thought they could push around was gone. I was the contractor now, the man who knew exactly where the load-bearing walls were."
I've spent 28 years being reliable. I've paid for every whim, every tantrum, and every dream you've ever had. But I realized something. If I'm not family enough to bring my wife to a wedding I'm paying for, then I'm certainly not family enough to be your bank account. You're being petty, Diane chimed in, her voice shrill. Robert, think about the scandal. What will people say? I don't care what your friends say, Diane. And as for the scandal, I think the real scandal is raising a daughter who thinks her father is nothing more than an ATM. I've already spoken to Marcus. Since the deposit wasn't paid, the Grand Oaks is releasing the date. There's a corporate retreat that's been on the waiting list for months. They're signing the contract as we speak. Chloe stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. I'll sue you, you promised. There's no contract between us, Chloe, I said. Everything is in my name, and since I'm the one who didn't pay, well, I'm the only one with the right to cancel, which I have, effective 5 minutes ago. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. The silence in the room was absolute. Chloe looked like she was about to have a physical collapse. Tyler was staring at his plate, suddenly realizing that his private equity lifestyle didn't include a $100,000 wedding gift from a man he'd insulted.
The lunch is paid for, I said, looking at Marcus. But that's the last thing I'm paying for. Chloe, I hope you and Tyler have a wonderful life. Maybe you can use some of that branding you're so proud of to pay for a nice backyard barbecue. I hear Tyler's parents have a very nice yacht. Maybe they can host you. I walked out of that room with my head held high. I didn't look back to see the tears or hear the screaming that I knew was coming. I walked out into the crisp afternoon air, got into my truck, and drove home to my wife. The fallout was, as I expected, a disaster. Chloe had to cancel the wedding. She couldn't get her deposits back on the dress or the flowers because those were in her name, and she didn't have the money to cover the balance. She and Tyler ended up getting married at the courthouse 3 months later. I heard through the grapevine that Tyler's parents didn't offer a single cent to help them. Apparently, high society doesn't like to pay for things any more than I do. Alina and I took the $100,000 I saved and did something I'd wanted to do for a long time. We bought a small cabin on a lake in North Carolina. It's quiet there. The only branding I worry about is the brand of lure I'm using for the bass. Chloe calls me every Sunday now. Her voice is different, softer, more careful. She hasn't asked for money in 6 months. She knows now that I'm not just a bank account. I'm the man who built the house, and I'm the man who can take it down if the foundation isn't right. It's funny how a little bit of silence in a canceled trek can teach a person more about family than 28 years of handouts ever could. I'm at peace, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I've finally earned the respect I worked my whole life to build.